Hey, Fez. So I was on this walk and I was getting all philosophical and contemplative. So, like, if you'll indulge me, it gets a little religious, but check it out. Bear with me, if you will. This idea that, like, okay, so what if this whole second coming of Christ thing is less about an individual and more about that whole consciousness of Christ, right? I think some of us might have heard this a time or two, or maybe not. Maybe it's the first time. Christ consciousness being this concept that, like, we all wake up to this Christ essence within, this, like, this pureness of of alignment with self and with source, and like living from that space. And like, I'm just imagining, what if we all just kind of decided to embody that? Would that not be the manifestation of a hopeful fantasy, if not prophecy, of, the greater awakening? And I think about that particularly in times such as now, where it feels like there is this sort of rumbling to the surface, something that has forever existed, an invitation for us to choose, and to choose wisely, hopefully, lovingly. This put it in our face awareness of what exists, this shadow of like how we can be to one another, with one another, and with ourselves. And there's a choice point. We make this individually and collectively. Like, how do we desire to be? How shall we align? Will we live by a set of values that is like for all, for always? Or do we live more individualistically from this space of, I make my decisions based out of sort of a lack sort of mindset, which propels us to, indulge in propensities, perhaps, of like overprotection that may look like, greed to some extent, like hoarding, like resources, this like desire and like almost complex need to maintain positions of power, to be quick to recognize difference in order to sort of separate out like what might be safe and what might not be safe. Like, narcissistic behavior has its roots in trauma. Like, that word is so not understood anymore because it's so commonized, not normalized, but commonized. When I say this word, I mean those life events, circumstances, forces outside of your control that can be fracturing, if not debilitating, if not completely uprooting and or devastating. And some live those experiences out more chronically and perpetually than others. And then there's the societal concept of those who have experienced great suffering have done this unto themselves. Somehow, some way, we rationalized our differences in order to make ourselves feel less bad about the difference. Because if we took away this concept of blame and we just looked at one another from the space of, no, everyone's fundamentally good, everyone's fundamentally deserving of the same thing that I am, we are one, then it becomes harder, doesn't it, to treat one another poorly. And it becomes much easier to see one another lovingly. All right, so tangent over, bringing it back to Christ's behavior that could bring us to this manifestation of the consciousness. I was thinking about something like the gospel, and just the fundamental beauty of the gospel was, to me personally, less about these manifestation and miracles that people wanted to see, so much as the moments of modeling, because what he modeled was beautiful and simple and radical, right? Whether he went off to sojourn in what you call prayer or meditation, he did that a lot, intentionally, and he desired to bring his community members into that with him, recognizing the power and significance of it, the impact. So taking time for ourselves, self-reflection, grounding in, processing, feeling the feelings of what has happened, allowing ourselves to like integrate it, make meaning out of it, put away what doesn't belong to us, recognize what it is we want to take with us, and then like put it all together so that we can put ourselves together and present ourselves accordingly, right? He modeled for us the power and the importance of taking time out for ourselves in that particular way. And I love it. I think it's beautiful. So I wonder if we bring more of that into our lives. Might that not bring us more towards a Christ-centered life, right? Christ-conscious-centered life. Religion is not a thing here. It's about an humanity, soul-to-soul thing, right? So another thing I was thinking about is like what we do unto the least of us, right? And I think we become numb in some ways out of survival to the suffering of others. And again, I think that comes home to like this conditioned tendency towards recognizing, categorizing, and like individualizing, like separateness. So we can find difference, and then we can find, ourselves on the spectrum of where we feel in terms of righteousness or not. But I think when we do unto the least of ourselves and we really think about that as a core value, it makes us more mindful to the moment and the situation. And when we can see that beyond what we would, see if we were on autopilot, it gives us the opportunity to not only experience grace, but call it in, welcome it in, invite it in, receive it in, and say thank you in the moment. Because you can't help but learn and make meaning when you allow yourself to be connected in that way where you don't see difference. So for a practice, I might imagine when we walk by insects, instead of just crushing them sometimes or being indifferent to them or apathetic at all, what if we acknowledged them? What if we acknowledged trees? What if we acknowledged birds? What if we acknowledged the flowers? And what if we acknowledged the rocks? What if we acknowledged the sunshine and the stars and the moon? The point being is, what if we acknowledged everything with a sense of sacredness? That's really what I'm driving home. The sense of mutual connection to me feels like a sacredness. I'm just imagining, what if we practice that quite deliberately with everything in existence? How might that bring us about towards a greater sense of Christ consciousness? And lastly, I was thinking about the sense of how Jesus, Yeshua ben Yosef, think about the company he kept, and I think that's important. First of all, tribe was essential in the times, and he knew it. He created it when it didn't exist. I think that's valuable. But also valuable is that those he chose to go be with were not the Pharisees and the priests and, those who practiced orthodox for the times. Who did he hang out with, guys? He hung out with everybody that was cast by society. So who do you think you'd be hanging with today? I'm not saying that we should distinct in terms of how we connect and make connections, but I'm saying diversifying our community. It's essential to grow in order to be around. To grow, we need to be exposed, and being exposed in varying ways exposes various things. It's not like bias and prejudice and racism is an ingrained thing, but it's a deeply conditioned one. So for us to undo the conditioning, it does necessitate that we expose ourselves to conditioning. I think that's the point of being around diverse community. That, and it's just amazing to allow yourself to do away with the concepts of self as have been ingrained by practice and time and circumstance and environment. It's like traveling. Exposure to fresh scenes and spaces and perspectives and energies and beautiful souls expands your world, and that can never be a bad thing. I think the more familiar we get with one another, the harder it becomes to differentiate one another, and the easier it becomes to manifest that compassion, to truly embody and grow out that sense of compassion for one another and therefore ourselves. And I think these are some core essential truths and just simple practices of existence that we could truly bring on, that would bring us home to one another in this beautiful kind of way, in my opinion. So thanks for taking this walk with me. Much love and light always.